Okay, it's 12:30, and I think we are live. So I'll just like to call the meeting to order. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Monday, June 29th, 2020, Board of Health Emergency meeting. Just remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded by audio and video pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 pandemic order. The provisions for this meeting have been provided through the open meeting laws to happen remotely. We do, with Jimmy not being connected, we actually do have a quorum. So I think he'll probably get on before we get to that vote anyways. For attendance purposes, could I get by roll call? And I'll start with the board members first. Just say whether you're present or not. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Malcolm McNabb.
Here.
Jim Cooper, if you give us a thumbs up. Okay, we also have some other attendees here. We have David Gray from the sewer department. We also have Chief Bill Pittman from the police department.
Here.
And Greg Corbo from town council. Over to Roberta.
There we go. Sorry, my audio was messed up. Jim, if you also are having trouble getting your audio in, if you click the drop-down menu where it says mute, it can also give you switch to phone audio and you can call in. It'll give you a phone number to call in if that's also giving you trouble. So thank you all for responding on such a short notice. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with the packet so that we can go through the emergency order. And what's really coming down, what is really giving us a heads up is I just want to give us the impetus for what this order, why this order is so important. So with the 4 new cases last week, we've started looking into what was needed, why it was so important, why we would need masks. And there's increasing evidence through the CDC how the masks are going to stop the spread. It is very effective at preventing the spread of COVID-19 through any sort of respiratory droplets, through any sort of aerosols. We're not asking people to put on N95s. We're not asking people to put on N100s, things like that. We just a simple cloth mask to prevent the aerosol from someone speaking or sneezing. In light of that information, we're also seeing a significant amount of people not paying attention to the mask order from the governor downtown and in downtown Wisconsin. So what we're looking to do is with this order is to define where we would do some more enforcement, where we're asking everyone to pay attention to wearing masks on the public roads while we're in downtown. And we're just asking, this order will also give us the ability to delegate authority to other town departments to help us with enforcement and outreach and education.
You not want that?
And then shortly you'll see in your packet, and I will share the screen so that everyone can see it. I asked David Gray to be with us today to discuss what this BioBot report on the sewage report is. It is incredibly important that we look at this because we know that the sewage reports are indicative of what is to come. It is also showing what we see in asymptomatic carriers. So let me share the screen. And it's showing you the wrong, there it is, okay. So everyone can see this report from the Surfside Treatment Plant? Okay. So David, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but what we're seeing here is the BioBot report from the laboratory showing that COVID-19 is being found on people who are shedding the virus in their human waste that is being found in the treatment facility. This is the sample taken from June 8th. It really just takes that long for us to get the reports in. The laboratory is backed up, so they're getting to it as fast as we can. So they did detect COVID-19 in the waste stream here, which here on next page, you'll see on the bottom right, the estimated caseload of both symptomatic and asymptomatic carriers on Nantucket at the time of June 8th, approximately 160 cases. If we were to look at, if we were to say 90% of those are asymptomatic, that means that approximately 16 cases are on Nantucket at this moment who are showing symptoms, and if they weren't wearing masks, would be responsible for spread. And if the spread really is 2 people per active case, which is what the R number is, we can say that those 16 people could have spread it to up to 32 more people on that day alone. With this information in hand, we're finding that it is more important that we add the ability to enforce the governor's order. And by adding this local order, what that allows us to do is be able to delegate more of that authority. The governor's order explicitly says enforcement falls on the Board of Health. The Board of Health and the health department has a staff of 5. We need help. We need people out there. We need people being able to just simply just say, hey, can you put on a mask? We are getting some people who are flipping us the finger, giving us 4-letter words to say it. We're not asking anyone to get into an altercation. Just a simple, wear a mask. And if they say, I forgot one, well, here's one. It's just so that we can get more presence out there. We can get people out there. And then with this order, we can enforce it better in the core district, both on people, both on and businesses and our own employees. Yes, we will be enforcing this on our own employees. We need to lead by example. Let's not slide back to all the hard work that the island residents have done so well to do in the last 120 days. We have asked for them to do the impossible, and they have done it. Now we need to be able to maintain that. With many more information on this BioBot sample, David, if you want to add anything else on that before we get to the emergency order. Dave, you're still muted. There you go.
Hey, well, thank you everyone for having me. Yeah, and I got this to Roberto as soon as I got it, just so you guys would have it in hand. Our last sample was sent out on June 23rd, so we have another sample waiting to come back. And we will be sampling again on the week of the 4th. So sometime around June 6th or July 6th or 7th, we'll be sampling again. And as we go forward, we'll be sampling every 2 weeks. And the way this has been presented to me, and it's a forecaster of potentially what's there or that hasn't come forward yet. So it's another tool in our toolbox. So it's very handy.
So before I move on to the orders, Malcolm.
Of course, this doesn't, the numbers are higher because we're obviously not getting septic reports. But if we look at our the number of positive tests below 10%, of course, this is a different metric. I don't know how we can combine it, but are we getting close to, we're obviously getting more numbers than we thought we had.
So we're definitely getting more numbers than we thought we had, but if maintaining that metric, they actually put that metric in the report where it says 160 cases right on the bottom right. I'm going to see if I can highlight it right here. If you notice, it just says 0.92 incidence rate. 0.92%. So even then, that's very good. With that is still below a 1% positive rate. I'm trying to remember what David, do you remember what population number they used for this?
They were using the population that they were getting out of the Massachusetts. I think it says on the front page where they're getting the numbers from. We only give them our flows, our daily flows, and then they get an average. And this waste stream does include septage, root waste, leachate. It accepts all waste streams that we get, as this is a 24-hour composite sample. It's not just a grab. It goes for 24 hours. So anything in our waste stream is getting caught by our sampler.
So do we include this? I'm sorry. Do we include this as part of our metrics, like metric 7?
I would say yes. Let's include this as part of metric 7. We can do this as a metric number 7. It is still it falls into, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it is metric number 2. I see that you have them in your hand. Metric number 2, which is % positive cases of testing.
It's not actually. It's number 1, and it says keep below 10%.
Yes.
So and it's estimated now like 1.5 or something like that.
Yeah, because those are based on our testing capability, our testing. So this number we can do this as metric 7, but it would be dovetailed with metric number 1, which is still 10%.
Okay, so but I mean, as expected, we have more cases than we thought we did, which we knew would happen. But I'm getting a little nervous about I hope we don't have to go with more restrictions beyond masks. That's all.
If people adhere to the mask order, the more we adhere to the mask order, the lower the R number will be.
Right.
And I think this is one of the importance of why one of the pieces of data as to support why the masks are so important.
Okay.
And I saw Steve, I know, and then
and one more question. Sorry to take the time, but I mean, there is a state order for this.
yes.
What's the difference between our order and the state order?
The state order requires the enforcement to be done by just the Board of Health staff. And one of the things, and it's only when you can't social distance the 6 feet. What this is doing, what our order would be doing, is requiring masks at all times.
Yes, good. It's hard to social distance on Main Street or the Strip.
Exactly. So this would say, whenever you're on Main Street, wear a mask.
I got you. Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to get back a little bit to the numbers and just of the metrics of the sewerage, and maybe just say and remind everybody the island's about half and half, so not everybody on island gets it here. So I would think the numbers could be even, could be even higher.
Could be even higher than this. And
yes.
And the good news with that is, even if we were to double this, it still only hits 1.84%. And if we triple it, it's still only 2.7%, which is still well below the 10% of what our metric is. So that's the good news on that.
Anybody else have any questions for Dave?
Melissa has her hands up.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much, Steve. I wanted to agree on adding the metrics of the sewer to our list of evaluation, but I'm also curious about and I think that ratio is really important. Just a couple of things that I am replaying in my mind as the newest member of the select board, and this board is what I remember hearing you and the hospital say, is that we're prepared to have some incidence of COVID here, and that we need to have some sampling of the virus on the island to learn about it and how we respond to it. So in my mind, this emergency order is not necessarily a reaction to the increasing numbers, which we likely expected to have happen, but it's a response to irresponsible behavior that we're seeing, and is a way that we can try to support our business community by having stronger enforcement in these areas. So I didn't want to me, it was important to walk through those two different issues, and that we continue to need to find a way within our community to live as safely as possible with COVID-19. And this mask order does that in my mind. And I think if we can add that metric, I am curious, will the results always take this long to get back? So we sent the June 23rd sample out. Are we looking at 2 or 3 weeks before we see that?
They keep saying that most results will be back within 5 to 7 days. However, from what I gather from talking to the BioBot team, is they're now testing internationally as well. So yeah, there is a delay. We actually had the preliminary reports a few days ago, but we couldn't decipher how to calculate it without this final report. So yeah, I'm hoping that, and they keep saying, they promised me again in the email this morning that the results should be coming back quicker, but I don't know.
Thank you, David. I suppose that just supports the idea that while the metric is really important and we should be keeping an eye on it and talking about it, it's a lot of historical data. And so I'm not sure how we use that to influence policy decisions. But thank you. Those are my comments right now.
I see Jimmy has his hands up, but Jimmy, can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is, if we all agree on this, and how does it come down to enforcement?
Yes.
That's the big question in my mind.
The enforcement is actually one of the biggest questions on everyone's mind. One of the things so in that case, so should we move to the order then? All right. Then
yeah.
All right, then in this case, I'll go ahead and switch up to the order. David, I think do we have any, before we move on to the order, are there any more questions for David?
I'll still hang in there for a little while, Roberto.
Okay. All right, thank you, David. I really appreciate you being here. So with the emergency order, what we're asking to do is the enforcement is definitely the big question on a lot of people's minds. So what we're asking here is, I think I have it ordered. So you'll see here on number 8, we have, to the extent that necessary, the order shall be enforced by Board of Health officials, Nantucket police officers, natural resources, building inspectors, and all other agents of the board. So what we're looking to do is to be able to get agents to the board. Right now, the only agents are my staff, is myself and the staff. So we're trying to get agents out there so that they can at least, gather information, get that sort of stuff to us. What we're not asking people to go out there and just start giving tickets and going after everyone with billy clubs. That's too heavy-handed. So what's going to be done is, most of our volunteers and all of our COVID officers, what they're going to do is, as agents, they can observe and report. So if they can get information on who people are, the warning letters and the tickets that are going to be being sent out, or any sort of fines, would be sent out by my staff. So the tickets would be coming out from me. What we are asking is the people who are present in these towns and in the 2 core districts, which I'll pull up shortly. What we are asking to do is that they can, at the very minimum, ask, when you put on a mask. If they get any sort of belligerence with our COVID educators or anyone like that, we don't want them to get into a conflict. What we're looking to do is to get the information. Unfortunately, some of this does include the businesses. and it does include our staff as well. Our staff, when I say our, I mean the entire town. So if we see DPW workers out there not wearing their masks in this core district, we will be connecting with them and possibly fine. When, if we are out there with our own employees, same thing. We're trying to lead this by example. So yes, the enforcement is a little bit harder, but we are going to be out there ticketing on our end. It's going to be health department personnel doing the tickets. Everyone else who is set up as an agent is to get us the enforcement information. So they can, take a picture, they can get information on what it is they're seeing, who they're seeing, and get that to us so that they can, because that is what holds up for us as you as an agent reporting it to us so that we can issue the fine. I know that was very circular and rambly. It's as we get out there, it'll gel more. It's easier to see it than to explain it. Jimmy, did I answer your question or do you need more?
I have a question, Roberto. Is there any thought to asking the local businesses up and down Main Street to have masks available for people that want to go into the stores like this that don't have a mask?
Some businesses are already doing that, but we are actually, that's exactly the point of what we're going to be doing. We have ordered a bunch of masks. We have 1,000 masks here already. We have about 2,000 more masks on order. We're just waiting to receive them, and they're coming in 50 mask boxes. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to have masks available for anyone who is on Main Street here and out in Wisconsin to be able to get those masks as they walk in. We hear complaints about people waiting in line without a mask, and when you ask them, do you have a mask? They say, I forgot it. Well, you didn't forget it now, you have this one. So it's the same concept of the no mask, no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Thank you. I'm gonna need to ask for some clarification on the enforcement because I think from a practical standpoint, I'm still a little confused about how this is gonna work. And I wanna say about the practicality of enforcement, schedules of enforcement officers, range of fines, just sort of the practical matters of it. And then as a second question that I just received from somebody in the public, Denise Cronow, if we know, are there other municipalities ticketing and how is that going? How is that? Can learn from that.
Yes. So as far as what tickets are going to be issued, they're going to be on the schedule of 21D, Chapter 21D. So it is your non-criminal disposition, first warning, and then up to a $300 fine. There's a set of steps, and we actually put it in the order here. Here we go, which is number 10. Which can be up to $300 that we can use. What we are also going to see is on number 11, any business is allowed to eject people for not wearing the masks as well. So we are asking everyone to work together on this in the core districts. As far as, can you repeat Denise Cronow's question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Just are there other municipalities who have the enforcement model and how is that going? Are there, I'm adding my question to that, are there lessons learned from this? And Roberto, maybe a follow-up to the ticketing question would be, are we going to be issuing warnings? And how will we know if we're approaching somebody a second time to give them a $50 fine, third time $100? Again, just from that very practical standpoint, how are we going to do the enforcement?
So that's definitely the hardest part because we don't have a system where we can log them in on a computer, for example, so not everyone will know who has a warning. but since we're logging in all the tickets ourselves, we have a tracking system of all the tickets, all the warnings that we give internally. We will have that data, but unfortunately, sometimes the people out there don't always have the data. So some people might get a warning more than once or a couple times, as those frequent flyers will become more and more known. I do know that Provincetown has a mask order. I do not know exactly Chief, I don't know if you know any more information on this. I do not know how they're enforcing a lot of their work, but I do know they have the same order, and I know their health department is out working, because Morgan Clark is a good colleague of mine, and I know they've been met with some resistance on their main thoroughfare. And Chief, please feel free to jump in on any of this.
Okay. So the enforcement part is my biggest concern, because a bad enforcement mechanism is no enforcement mechanism. And I don't know of any way to make this a good enforcement process. I mean, honestly, the business owners are our best chance of success. They're going to have to just refuse entry to anybody that's not wearing a mask. That will make people wear a mask. The enforcement gets to be problematic because there seems to be a belief that the police will be the ones who will be doing this. And we really can't do that. We are there to assist with enforcement. In other words, if a disturbance breaks out, somebody's in a premise and they're asked to leave and they don't leave, we can go there and assist with that. There's a law enforcement reason. But whenever we take somebody's name, we have to write a report. Now, when somebody is questioned because of not wearing a mask, and then we're expected to pass that information on to the health department, not only are we giving the information to the health department, but we're also creating a record for that individual in our records management system. And I think this is going to ultimately be have a very disproportionate impact on minorities in the community because of the language barriers. And I think it's also going to be quickly conceived by many of the visitors as being anti-visitors, because those are the ones who will be typically questioned. We've already been at the PD employing a education model on people when the opportunity arises. But what we're encountering is a tremendous amount of resistance. I mean, it's one thing when they flip a parking, enforcement person the bird. It's another thing when they're doing it to a police officer who's trying to engage in their lawful duties. And we don't want to push this. It's kind of a real sensitive subject. As far as the Cape goes, I've been in meetings with the Cape chiefs, and virtually every department over there, and most departments in Massachusetts, for that matter, have taken the same attitude. We don't want to become the mask police, because we're typically, most people who are not wearing a mask out there, especially after a certain time in the evening, there's generally alcohol involved, or the individual's got some other type of unstable situation going, and it could potentially end up being a conflict point. And we don't need those needless conflicts in society right now. It's easy to say, well, the police should just back away if it starts that way. It doesn't work that way, because what typically happens is that if you don't deal with the problem, then the problem festers and the problem builds. So I don't like the enforcement part. I think it's going to have to be on the businesses. I think they're the ones going to have to take the responsibility. We can watch the businesses to make sure they're doing it and deal with that. But I don't see our officers out ticketing people for not wearing a mask. It's just, not practical. They're not going to be able to stop their cruiser in the middle of the road to encounter these people. That would be very disruptive. The CSOs, they're limited by policy to just doing parking enforcement and traffic control. We took away all their other enforcement ability back in 2008 after we had a serious incident between some citizens and our summer special officers. And it started out with something just as small a problem as not wearing a mask, essentially. It was somebody standing in the street that was told to get off the street. So we've taken great pains over the years to avoid these situations. So we need to, what I think the town should do is we should hang banners all over town saying, wear your mask, that kind of thing.
Melissa?
Thank you. And Chief, thank you for that. I agree with you. It's an untenable situation, I think, for any enforcement officer. I wonder, however, if this emergency order of requiring the masks downtown gives the businesses a bit more reinforcement in their policies. And I also agree with the statement that it feels to me we're woefully behind on any kind of town of Nantucket signage. And if there's a way we can support the health department and other town offices in getting that done as quickly as possible, I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. I love the idea of banners, large signs, universal, masks required signs or symbols that can reinforce that message to give the businesses, I think, support from the town that, at least in the comments and feedback I've been receiving, they need, because they also can't be enforcers. And there have been instances, I think, where members of the public have argued and taken issue among each other, and it may not have required law enforcement involvement, but tensions are very high right now and people are very afraid. And I'm also concerned about, not to over exaggerate, but vigilantism, where people are riding around looking for people without masks and pointing them out and saying, put your mask on. So we have to rely on education, and we really need to do a much more efficient and louder job of explaining that masks are required when you can't physically distance 6 feet. And I'm leaning towards supporting this policy of requiring them in the district. Again, understanding that maybe there isn't a lot of teeth to it if we don't have, stringent enforcement of it, but just the message in and of itself may be enough to give the businesses what they need to say this is not optional, it's required downtown.
So I know there's two things. I know there's that strict enforcement is definitely something we're going to try to do through the health department, not like the chief said, so that we don't create that sort of a situation. But also, as far as the banners go and everything, we are working on that. We are in the process of, we already ordered from Poets Corner huge signs. I know there's a couple that are 38 by 48, that just to have them in sawhorses and stuff around town, and we can have them with any of the card tables and volunteers that we're trying to set up. We're trying to set up a mechanism to have a volunteer core group, core as in CORPS, not core group as in the core district. Trying to set up a core volunteer effort so that we can have volunteers out there too, to try to prevent sort of vigilantism. Chief is absolutely right in that businesses we need businesses to help on this, as far as not allowing people inside without masks. I know Greg Corbo, Town Council, you've had your hand up for a while. I just now noticed it on the panelists, so I'm sorry about that. I think, are you still available, Greg?
Hi, Roberto. Yes, I am still here. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to weigh in, and some of what I'm going to say has already been said, but I have worked on a number of these regulations and policies, and my experience has been similar to what has been described by Roberto and the chief, in that, there is a real concern that, this is not a police matter, and that having the police involved in enforcement escalates this in a way that, may not be appropriate for the situation. But, what I've explained to people is that by having this mechanism in there, what it does is it gives you another tool in your toolbox. And so, the first line of defense here is definitely, educate and inform. Continue to beat the drum on the benefits of wearing masks, the consequences of not wearing masks, and getting people to voluntarily comply. Oh, if you need a mask, here you go. And that, as you look at ramping up enforcement, it's more of a sort of a last ditch effort that we've tried all other avenues of voluntary compliance and nothing seems to be working, and so now we need to go to the next step. And those next steps could be issuance of tickets to individuals or businesses. You can also look at the businesses through a licensing context. And so, any business that has a license issued by the town, whether it's a food permit or a liquor license or an entertainment license, those licenses can be at risk if they fail to comply with the regulations of the Board of Health or of the town in general. And there is a provision in here that, gives the business owners the ability to enforce by, asking the police to remove anybody who refuses to comply. But, there is a baseline here of enforcement discretion. I certainly would never suggest that a lay person, if you will, put themselves in physical jeopardy, by approaching someone, in an enforcing type way, not knowing what they're going to receive on the other side. While police officers are trained to handle and de-escalate those types of situations, agents of the Board of Health may not be. And so, they should, proceed with caution. I fully, recommend signage, as much signage as possible. And, but all that being said, I also think that adopting this as an order in and of itself sends a message of how important and serious that this is. And even if, you're not going to go all the way down the road of issuing tickets, at least people see that this is an order, it's a legal requirement, and your enforcement officers can stand behind that, so that if you're questioned, well, why do I have to do this? The explanation can be, well, here in Nantucket, in this particular area, it's the law. And we're just simply asking you to comply with the law. And, for many people, that's going to be enough. That's the teeth that you need. And obviously there are going to be some people who say the law is wrong, I'm not going to do it. And you'll respond to them as you will. But, I believe that just having this be the law in and of itself is a tremendous benefit to the town.
Dave? Hello? Roberto, is there any thought to go into the steamship and the High Line and maybe the marina and having signs put at their ticket office and on the boat saying, just be aware that when you get to Nantucket in the core district, you are required to wear a mask?
Absolutely, and that's the intent of our order. So there's been a lot of emails back and forth between town administration and myself today about where we can put this signage. And the three big ones actually are the Steamship Authority locations, Highline locations, and the airport, so that everyone can get that. So definitely, we are trying to get all that out. And then we're also printing out new signage as well. I know, Rachel, you're here now. We've had you brought up as a panelist. So if there's any more information on that I haven't seen since before the meeting. But what we're looking to do is get those 38 by 48 signs put in at the points of entry. And we're also looking to have a banner printed out, but I don't know where the banner stands. Rachel, can you
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I was a little delayed, but I actually just got a call while this meeting was going on. And right now, we're going to price out 2 banners that are about 8 feet and utilize those at larger locations. So we were thinking the rotary and trying to secure them to the device that's already there, so that wind is a concern, and how you can properly secure them so they don't blow away or blow down. And then we actually upgraded the size to 5 feet. They were originally the 32 by 48. We had about 12 of them. And those we upgraded the size. So we are thinking of locations. We do need to speak to a few of the areas like Highline, because it's not our property, and be sure that they're agreeable to have a location there. But we're also thinking the kiosk for the visiting services that's at the Straight Wharf, putting one there. Steamship, before, when we had talked about this in the very beginning, was willing to put one at that location at the very end of the truck alley on the green, right before the sidewalk starts. So hopefully they would still be agreeable to that. We also were thinking one of the banners could be at the landfill. We still are getting some concerns from people that are not seeing a lot of participation in mask wearing there. And then we have a few other locations, such as where the Jersey barriers now exist downtown, on some of the street closures to accommodate restaurant and on-street dining. So we think that as people are seeing these, the Main Street Fountain is another one. We already people post things there about football games and other events. So places that we do think are high visible locations. The airport is a great one. I'm sorry I sort of left them out before, so thanks for reminding me of that. But we also, with this order, one of the other things that we've been bouncing around today is also related to, we've seen it in other towns, they have signs up and that say mask zone. And we're looking at doing a very similar thing. So if this order indicates that we will have a requirement for masks in the historic district area, that might not mean anything to some people, especially if they're not from here, or day trippers, or short term, whatever. So we thought that if we could kind of put a few of those at visible locations through the downtown area as well. We don't want to oversaturate it, but we do think we agree, and we've been hearing a lot that we need to have a little bit more signage rather than just the ones that are in business windows and such. So we definitely are working on that, and they are expediting the order for us. So we do hope to get it with just in a few days once the order is actually confirmed and placed.
I am not sure. Steve, did you see my hand or say my name?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. I have 2 questions. One, I think, is just, for the board to, it is a little, the question has come up why this particular order needs to be an emergency order enacted today, as opposed to sort of a publicly posted meeting that has 48 hours of input and conversation. So I want to share that thought. And then also, Chief Pittman, I know that some of the enforcement or some of the behavior we're seeing is outside of the core district, at parties and things like that. Can you speak to how that's going and what you're seeing and how officers are responding when called to those situations?
Yeah, that's correct. There is a lot of incidents where we're answering calls now with large groups of people, and many of them don't have masks, et cetera. I mean, it is a tool in the toolbox we can use as an excuse to break up the party, but there's no enforcement going on. If there is enforcement, it's generally about the loud noise or some other criminal complaint that we're taking out. It's not about the mask or lack thereof or social distancing, but they'll generally mention it to the people as part of their discussion about what's wrong with what they're doing in an educational sense. One of the other things I'm glad you mentioned, there's been a lot of talk and mention about the core. And in fact, this order isn't the core. This order is about the historic district, which is a significantly bigger area than what's traditionally known as the core district. For our purposes in parking and what's all the conversations that have been taking place for years, the core district is really just Broad Street to Main Street, Center Street down to the waterfront. And but this order covers a significantly bigger area. and including Wisconsin, for this mask all the time.
We can definitely alter the bounds. That's to be just bound by like you said, Broad Street, Center Street, all the way up. Whatever is more tenable. We did use the historic district. I put in the historic district on this mainly because those were GIS maps that were already created, and it didn't want to recreate the wheel. But if it's easier to do it just to create the bounds for that first section, we can definitely rewrite that. As far as why it would be better to be an emergency order. So can you see the calculator here? Can the people see the calculator?
Yeah.
Okay. So why should we do this as an emergency order? So let's say we'll use very conservative numbers. Using the sewage information, we have the 160 cases on the island. Let's say we use a 95% asymptomatic. So that means only 8 people are showing symptoms today. So let's say and the R of COVID-19 is 2, which means every one of those people can infect 2 people. Let's say they each only infect 1 per day. And it replicates every 3 days. So we'll use 15 days. So if they infect only 1 other person, these 8 symptomatic people who are on island right now, they infect 1 person each today. In 3 days, it replicates. So 3 days out, those more people. 6 days out, 64 people. 9 days out, 128. 12 days out, 256. 15 days out, 512. If we use conservative numbers of a death rate of only 1%, 5 people can die. And that is the most conservative estimate we can do. And that is if those 8 people are infecting only 1 person over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow. If we were to do just the 4 cases from last week, and they only infect 1 person, 3 days out, 6 days out, 9 days out, 12 days out, 15 days out, using only 1% death rate. In my opinion, saving just 1 life is enough to make this an emergency. And that's 2 weeks out with no mitigation.
Yeah, I think this is a no-brainer. I would be willing to, look at with what Bill said, and yes, the historic district does encompass a very large area of the town. And we could change the wording to the core area of downtown in Siasconset. And this is we don't want to put this onus on the police department. They have enough to do, and the enforcement thing, I would, it's got to be an educational process. And like Jimmy said, I would, if you've rode the boat lately, and probably 85% of the people coming here are coming on the fast ferry, and there's a public announcement every single boat, every single time right before you come around Brant Point. It's easy to say that Nantucket is a mask-only zone in the downtown area until it's, it starts to get ingrained. Melissa?
I'm just wondering if we could see the map, and we're still sharing Roberto's screen, and I'm not as familiar with those bounds. So if we could see that town map, that would be awesome. Thank you.
So I just realized that it wasn't up. Okay, there it is. I have the screen share paused. So I just put it up, and what you'll see here is obviously a very large encompassed area. So if we want to change those areas, we do need to set bounds that we'll need to define in the order. And we'll have to make a new map just to go with it that we can get to. Welcome.
I see no reason to change the boundaries as proposed by Roberto. I mean, I don't see a good reason to make it smaller. I mean, obviously, we'll be watching closely in the core district, but I have no objection to the boundaries that are presently proposed.
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks, Roberto. Before the board proceeds to a vote, there were a couple of small changes I'd like to suggest based on the conversation here. And also, though, to point out that the other complicating factor for enforcement that you need to be aware of are the exceptions. And the exceptions are important. It's the one category of exception is for children. That's probably easy enough to make a call on. But the other exception is, for persons who are unable to wear a mask due to, physical disability or for some other medical reason. And it's important to understand that, if someone asserts that they cannot wear a mask for a medical reason, you have to accept that assertion. You're not permitted to ask them what their underlying medical condition is. And, there is risk that if you attempt to enforce against somebody who does have a legitimate health reason for not wearing a mask, that you can be subject to, or exposed to liability in that regard. So, that is something to be mindful of. And I just wanted to put that out there. In terms of changes to the document, if everyone has this, I can see it's still on the screen, but in paragraph 1, the names of the districts, the Nantucket Old Historic District, and I believe the second district is the Sconset Historic District, and there was just a typographical error there. Is that correct, Roberto?
So it's, Sconset is the official name of it, but Sconset.
Oh, okay. So what is the more common way that it's spelled?
This is technically the official spelling.
Okay.
We say Sconset. It's
gotcha.
like Sakacha Pond. It's actually spelled Seza Chacha.
Okay. All right. Then I will, I'm glad I asked. I will leave that one alone. Then the next change that I had, I'm just going to reject that. Okay. So under paragraph, sorry about that. Under paragraph 5, I added a clause to make it more clear that businesses shall not allow patrons to enter their establishment without a mask unless they qualify for an exemption, and all businesses shall post a sign on their main entrance doors advising customers that it is mandatory that the customer entering the business wear a face covering. And then the final change is in paragraph 10, with respect to the fines if non-criminal disposition is used. And Roberto had brought up the point that the potential for fines is up to $300. However, for purposes of non-criminal disposition, you have to set out specific monetary amounts for each offense. So I made it more clear that it would be $50 for a first offense, $100 for a second, $200 for a third, and $300 for a fourth or subsequent. And this is not a change, but I did want to point out that in paragraph 12, we remind everyone that enforcement officers are encouraged to educate offenders and exercise their judgment on a case-by-case basis. And so just to make it clear, as I said before, that the authority to issue fines does not necessarily mean that you have to issue fines. Officers will still have discretion in the field.
Any questions for Greg? I think that's good. I mean, I'm fine with the historic district. I just thought Bill brought up a good point about, you know, it is being big, but Malcolm also made the good point to just leave it as it is, which I'm fine with.
We also had a couple public comments in the writing. Now that I can see them now, sorry. Mary Longacre mentioned that the core areas might be too small and that there are many businesses and attractions just outside the core districts, like the Children's Beach, NRTA Terminal, etc. Michelle Whelan mentioned that in Wisconsin, she's been seeing lots of masklessness happening in the village. Sorry, I'm just going to try to go through these so that we don't accidentally blow people off. Marianne Hagley mentioned that she asked us if we can announce where and when people could sign up and get educated to help out as a COVID agent volunteer. We're working on that right now with the hospital, with Jason Graziadei from the Cottage Hospital. The hospital has been a tremendous partner in this. We really thank them. And we'll be working with them to set up a sign up way between the two of us so that we can get this up and running. We'll be working on that as soon as possible. Megan Browers asked, could police officers and or summer specials hand out masks to those not wearing them downtown rather than taking a more aggressive enforcement role? At least 50% of people on Main Street today are not wearing masks, and stores won't be in the position to enforce masks if those people are not entering the stores or only put on a mask to enter a store. Also, she thinks signs on every street lamp post or street corner are needed, and signs provided in Spanish and English for store owners. Real quick, as far as the signs go, we do have the intent to translate the signs, and we are putting things out. We are actually creating, and Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, mask zone masks as well. So we'll be putting them out on posts of you're now entering a mask required zone. So that would be out there, and we're trying to get those in multiple languages as well. Chief, if you want to take the question of could police officers and or summer specials hand out masks instead of taking an enforcement role?
Well, we don't have summer specials. We have parking enforcement people, community service officers. But what those individuals, they would only be able to have a limited number because they don't, quite frankly, they're not carrying satchels around with supplies. They're already carrying their parking tickets and their envelopes and all that stuff. The police officers do have masks in their cruisers that they can hand out to people who are in need. But you got to remember, when a police officer is driving down the street, that doesn't mean they're doing nothing. They're probably doing something. Most people don't realize we only have 3 officers on duty at a time for the whole island. And, you know, they're not setting up on a street corner just handing out masks. If that's something the town wants to do, we can create an overtime assignment and maybe get somebody to do that. But it hasn't been asked of us at this point. But it would definitely have to be an extra duty thing at this point.
Well, thank you. Thank you for answering that, because that's kind of the point of the COVID people that we're hiring right now. They're going to be out handing masks and doing this sort of educational campaign. So thank you, Chief, for answering that. Mary Longacre asked us to remind everyone to please put your mask in the trash and not flush it, because it's becoming just as bad, if not worse, than the wipes in the pipe situation. It's the wipes were a little bit cottony. This is full on cloth. So please throw your masks away and throw your gloves away. Don't throw them in the trash. And for anyone asking, I know DPW will be happy for me to say this, they go in the NERNIC pile. It's the non-recyclable, non-compostable trash. And then Marianne Hagley is also asking, it's that, or mentioning that it is not the people going into the retail that's more of the problem. It's those walking around with no masks and no social distancing on all the core streets, including the masses of people without masks and those that are clueless about masking policy. So that will definitely be the jobs of our COVID people in our outreach volunteer corps. So, and that's all the public questions we have here. I don't see many hands. I don't see any hands up. So we can move on to continue with the meeting. Sorry to have interrupted the discussion.
Does can't see, but does Greg have anything else to add?
Nothing at this time.
Jimmy had a question.
The only thing is, we know we're not going to get everybody. You know, that it would be great if we got everybody, but the ones that by doing this, the extra people that we can pick up, to just give them a mask and they'll put it on is going to help us. So there's no way this is not going to be a positive thing. So I think we should vote for this thing right now and get it done.
I don't know how we got an anonymous attendee come in, but they just asked, can this please be extended to the recycling center as well? And yes, we are asking we are going to be putting up signs out there as soon as we can. And then Bert Rice is asking, you know, you cannot enforce this, but suggest it. Please tell me we are not going to fine anyone. Fines will only be given in a really egregious circumstance. We had this whole discussion earlier about education being the primary form, but yes, rest assured, we are going to be working with people. And Melissa, you're muted, Melissa.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to ask if we could maybe have a follow-up at the select board meeting from you, Roberto, on enforcement and how this is going, because I think that remains the biggest concern of everybody is how are we interacting with folks and how is this going? I think the intention is that it gives, again, some power and reinforcement to our business community to be able to point and say masks are required in this area. But I want to keep a really close eye on enforcement and how that's rolling out.
Absolutely. I'll add this to my weekly update, the weekly COVID update. This week, obviously, it's not going to be a lot of information on it, but more so next week. It is really important for those watching and for as all this information that we're putting out there is this weekend is really a linchpin for us. 4th of July weekend is huge, and we need to pay attention to these mask orders. Melissa?
Yes, I'm sorry. I did have one other comment, and maybe this is for you and for Rachel. I have been contacted by some folks in the real estate association, and I'm not sure, if again, picking up a conversation with lodging association, but any communication that any associations could put together and send out to their visitors who are either here or preparing to come here. I know there's been some public concern about short-term stays and that the quarantine is a recommendation and an urging, not a requirement. But I think you'll find that most folks who are in the business of doing, welcoming guests would really welcome information to share with them if it could be in some kind of cohesive form, whether that's the summer 2020 link or whatever you think. And I'm happy to help put an eye on that and facilitate it. But I think anything we can do, particularly in preparation for this weekend, to send out to people who are planning to come Friday, Saturday, or Sunday for either the weekend or a week, and who will not quarantine, how they can be here safely and limit their public interaction, wear masks downtown, all these things that we hope that they will do if we can give those folks a distinct way to tell them what we expect I think will go a long way to helping this weekend and subsequent weeks of the summer be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the summer 2020 link is perhaps our biggest, perhaps our biggest way to push information out. One of the things that we're going to be also getting out there, and the screen share again so that you can see it, is the COVID officers have these little handouts. They're going to be about the size of a business card where they have the information on the mask. And then on the back, there's going to be a QR code so that you can get to the summer 2020 link, because that's where we're trying to get as much information out as possible. So I just wanted to quickly get that out. Anyone watching, if you're on YouTube or something, you can actually pause YouTube and use this on your smartphone. Any camera, most updated smartphones have a camera where you can just point on this and it'll take you straight to the website.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to eliminate more paper and being passed around and sharing in that way. So the cards, thank you, Roberto. That was one thing I was going to mention. And that link, it goes right to that page. It's got a lot of information on that page. So I think sometimes it's overwhelming for people, but that's where the most information is. And I know this morning there was a discussion with the Economic Impact Task Force, and there is a video that is being developed. And a little bit of the feedback that we got was it's not mask focused enough. They wanted a little bit stronger of a message on make sure you wear your mask. So it might be edited a little bit. So I know we're hoping to have that and then share that. And it was mentioned possibly getting out through the chamber and the business association so that they can start having them add it to their own website so that people can see, especially the real estate agencies. Because a lot of them do put a lot of that type of thing on their websites anyways for people who are coming to the island. So absolutely, thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Seeing none, so can I get a motion to accept this new mask order as written?
I'm so moved.
Second.
Okay, by roll call vote, as I see you, Malcolm McNabb,
Yes.
James Cooper,
Yes.
Melissa Murphy,
Yes.
and Steve Visco chair says yes.
Thank you so much. I think, and can we get a implementation date of tomorrow, if that's possible, by midnight tomorrow?
I propose tomorrow by midnight.
I'll second that.
By roll call vote, Malcolm McNabb, we missed you.
Yes.
Okay, James Cooper,
Yes.
Melissa Murphy,
Yes.
and Steve Visco chair says yes. Okay,
Much.
I'd like to thanks everybody for taking the time to make this happen. Thanks, Bill and Melissa, our new select board member from the select board, and thank you, Rachel. Thanks, Greg from Town Council.
And thank you, everyone, for being here. Chief, David, Greg, and Rachel. We've been working on the back end on this, so we really appreciate all the hard work. Rachel and Greg really are a lot of the unsung heroes for a lot of this outreach campaign here. So we really thank you, Rachel and Greg, and the staff. It's been, we're moving forward.
Great.
So thank you all for spending your afternoon with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.